Hello, my name is Carlos Erban, and today I'm going to talk to you about metering. Metering, when I first started photography, especially digital photography, metering was always an intimidating subject. And it was because the way it's explained sometimes is very complicated. And it really isn't. It's not complicated at all. So what I'm going to try to accomplish with this video is to demonstrate to you what the different metering modes are for the Nikon digital SLRs, and then that you can see the effect of each of them under the same circumstances. And then at the end you can make your conclusions if you want to change your metering settings or not. Last night I went to a presentation with a very famous photographer, and it always happens. One of the questions that always comes up is, what metering mode do you use? And it's funny because each time I go to one of these presentations with the famous photographers, each one says something different. So I think it makes things even more confusing. In my opinion, the response should be, it depends. It depends on the situation. So I usually use Lightroom to show all of these things, but what I like about the VNX2 is that it gives you all the information of the camera and the flash and so on. But before we do that, what I like to do is, go to the manual. I think you should always read your manual. And one of the reasons why I'm doing this video is because sometimes I think the manuals are written so confusing that after a while taking pictures, I've been able to finally understand what sometimes it means. So if you go to the exposure section for metering, and by the way, this is a manual for the D800, but I'm sure the explanation is the same one for every camera because they all have the same three options. Basically you have matrix, center weighted, and spot. Okay, so matrix, this is produces natural results in most situations. Camera mirrors a wide area of the frame and set exposure according to tone distribution, color composition with type G, D, lenses, this information, 3D color. I'm reading like that on purpose because by the fourth line or third line, if I'm a beginner, I'm lost. Okay, it started very well, produces natural results in most situations, and then it goes into non-CPU lenses, uses color matrix, non-CPU. Go to page. One of the things that I hate the most about these manuals is that they always send you to different pages that are nowhere close to the page you're reading. So it goes, go to page 373. Okay, so what's in page 373? I don't know. I mean, you have to go all the way down here. You're trying to understand what metering is, and I think it's sending me to the menus. Let's see, this is so it's telling you to do third steps, half a step, one step. Super confusing. Okay. So I understand perfectly, especially if you're a beginner, why this is so confusing. So then center weighted. Camera meters entire frame and assigns a graded weight to the center area. Up to there, I'm fine. It's when they continue telling you all these things that it gets very confusing. Something that is almost hidden here, okay? Classic meter for portraits, okay? And then recommended when used with filter exposure factor. This right here, okay, assigns the greatest weight to the center area. Classic meter for portraits. Those three words out of this whole manual is probably the best description of center weighted. Okay, spot. Camera meter circle 4 millimeters in diameter. Circle is center focus points possible in short side, even when the background is okay. So we read the manual. Okay, bottom line, matrix is based on an average of everything that you're seeing in your viewfinder. Center weighted puts most of the weight in the center points, depending how many you've selected. You have in the menus, it goes 9 millimeters, 12 millimeters, or you can make it bigger and bigger and bigger. I think the default is 12 millimeters. Oh, here it is. Default is 12 millimeters. Okay, I've always left it in the default. And then spot is based on a 4mm or 0.16 inches, which is a tiny section. So that really is the only thing that you need to know. Now I'm gonna you're probably gonna find this frustrating. Why am I looking now at a flash manual? You are, because what I'm gonna show you is that fill flash is essential when it comes to metering. Okay, I'm not gonna go through all the settings of a flash, I promise, but I want to go through something that is extremely important. Okay, this is for the SB910, but all the flashes have the same options. When you go to TTL, okay, TTL, okay, which basically means that it automatically adjusts for a well-balanced exposure. Okay, basically what it does is it has, see this thing right here, that means that it's, oh, here it is, monitor pre-flashes. So it sends a pre-flash to what you're pointing to, and then the camera, not the camera, the flash calculates what is the sufficient light that you need in order to produce enough light to have the, you know, the subject illuminated with proper fill flash. Now here is one of the things, I know a lot of advanced shooters that don't know what BL means. BL means balance fill flash. I like to think of it of background, because what it does is it takes into consideration the background. So it tries to give you a proper exposure of the subject, but taking into account the background. Now some of you have also seen something that says TTL FP, and a lot of people ask me, what does FP mean? FP means that it's in high curtain sync. So no, high speed sync, sorry, not high curtain sync, high speed sync. High speed sync means when you go over 250th of a second, the flash automatically goes into this mode where it emits several flashes to illuminate the subject properly. I have a whole video on high speed sync. I don't want to spend too much time on that, because what I really want to do is look at these pictures that I took with the 3 different metering options. So the first picture that I took, okay, I'm using a 24-70 lens. The focal length is 32mm, so I could get the background and the foreground. Okay, and then I'm using a single point, and I was pointing right here, right in the center. I went to manual focus because I was having a little bit of a hard time focusing. When I finally got it in focus, I switched it to manual, so then I don't have to bother going back and forth. But this is not about focusing. I'll have another video about manual focus on a later time. I was shooting at f8, so I shot this aperture because I wanted to get some of the background in focus, but it didn't need to be super sharp. I mean, I'm not trying to get perfect detail here of this building right here. I just want, you know, some separation from my subject, but that you can at least tell what's back there. Because if you go to a wider aperture like f4 or 2.8, then the background is going to be blurred, and that's not what I was trying to do. So since I'm in aperture priority, okay, and at ISO 200, and I'm using the matrix metering. Matrix, think of a matrix. You know, it takes all the things, all the points, or it takes all of your viewfinder, what you're looking through the camera, and makes an average of all of those. So it takes an average of this exposure, this exposure, this exposure, this exposure, and then it says, okay, based on all that, the best that I can do to give you the best exposure for everything, that's what matrix is. I'm using ISO 200. Since I have it on a tripod, I can go to a low ISO. Now I'm shooting 32mm, so you know, 1/50th of a second, I don't need to put it on a tripod. I have enough of a shutter speed, you know, to avoid camera shake. But I left it on a tripod because I wanted all the pictures to be identical. White balance, I put it in sunlight. Color space, Adobe RGB. That's by the way, this is a standard that I have all the time. Picture control, I left it on standard. I'm shooting raw, so I didn't want the camera to do any processing because I wanted you to look at the raw file so that you can see a big difference. So what's happening here? Well, the problem that's happening here is the camera doesn't know that this right here, okay, which, by the way, this is the target tool that I use to measure exposure. I'm assuming this is a, like this was a person. The camera doesn't know that this is important. It's doing an average of everything here, and it's giving me an exposure. And this is the best you can do, because it says, okay, I'm trying to give you an exposure so you can see some of the building. Well, the sky was not, it was overcast, so that's the way the sky was. And this is what come out. Now, obviously, that's not what I want, right? So that's, if I really want to see the background, right, then what I do, well, let me just show you one thing first, okay? So this is the same picture. I'm now switching to Lightroom, because Lightroom is a lot easier to show you what I want to show you. You see these spots here, okay? That means that the camera did a really good job doing that average, or this matrix, because what this says is this is where I'm losing detail, okay? And you can see it right. If I, by the way, if you click here and you click Alt, okay, I'm losing detail, okay, in all of these shadow areas. But you can see, oh, I moved it by accident. Double click here. So you see that's very little. I mean, as a matter of fact, I go here and I recover it. It's nothing, right? So that's very good. And then in the highlights, the only highlights that I have is that's nothing, okay? So we did a very good job. The problem is the camera doesn't know that what I care about is the target. So that's when I have to use my fill flash. So let's go back here so you can see what happens when you do the fill flash. When you do the fill flash, and what I like about this program is that it gives you all the information. It gives you the information about the flash. So I was using an SB910. It's on front curtain sync, which is fine. You only put it on rear curtain sync when you're doing like a car moving, and you want that trail in the back in slow. I mean, just the standard is for front curtain. It does the flash at the beginning. TTL, balance light, zero exposure, compensation. This is, let me see. In the right, so you have two ways to do compensation. You have in the camera and in the speedlight. Now let me explain. That's very important to understand the difference between the two. If I do in the camera the exposure compensation, then it affects everything, okay? So if I put, and I'll show you that in a moment, if I only do it on the speedlight, it only affects the area that is being illuminated by the speedlight. So if I want to keep this let's say darker, right, and I only want to illuminate this more, where you should increase the compensation is on the speedlight, not in the camera. There is a lot of confusion about that, okay? Then I have it in auto zoom, so it's zooming at 32 millimeters, exactly what the camera does, and illumination pattern is even, so I don't have any, I'm not trying to do anything with the zoom to concentrate a light or anything. It's just uneven. Okay, so now let's look at if this is a proper exposed picture or not. So this is my subject, so this is what we care about. You've seen some of my Lightroom videos, you know this trick. What you go is you use the cropping and you go here and it shows you what the what the exposure was for that area. I would say it's pretty good. I would say almost perfect. So the camera, when you do matrix and BL, does a really, really good job, okay, of this, illuminating or giving you a balance between the background and the foreground. I still think that the background, I know that it was overcast, but it's a little blown out for my taste. What I was telling you before, if you did the exposure compensation in your camera, this is what happens. You see? It affects everything. So if I go one step under, maybe my background now is better, but look at what happened to my subject. I lost a stop too, so that doesn't work. Now you can play with the shadows and all that. I'm not going to do a Lightroom class on this. But the bottom line is, what I think the way to get the best using this, I would have probably again, using aperture priority. I usually use manual, but let's just talk about aperture priority. In the camera exposure compensation, I probably would have gone 1 minus, and in the speed light, I would have gone 1 plus. That way, this is underexposed, right, to get a little bit more detail or less exposure, but then I still remain, you know, one. So let me show you something. If I go again here, you see I lost a stop. So in order to recover this, I would have to have my speed light set at 1 plus. Okay, so I took a long time on this picture because obviously I went over a lot of different things, and now with the other pictures I won't need to do that again. So now let's go to our second picture. So the second picture, and I don't need to go to my Nikon VX thing because you already know the information of the metadata. So in this one I did center weighted. So let's compare this one to this one. Okay, so what happened here? Okay, and by the way, they're set for the same white balance. It's trying to expose more for the, you know, for the center, and that's why you can see this. Let me see, is it the same? 5950. Let me just see something. 5950 14. I just want to see if it's the same white balance. 5950 14, 5950 14. Yeah, because when you have different exposures, if you have the same white balance, that affects it. As a matter of fact, to get the proper white balance here, well, I don't want to spend too much deviate from the main topic. So again, we look at these two pictures, right? Sorry. So this one and this one, okay, and it's slightly better exposed, my subject, which is the center, but then, you know, we still have the same problem with the background. So it didn't make much of a difference, to be honest. Now let's look at when we take it with a flash. Okay, you take it with a flash, and now let's compare the two. When you compare the two, okay, let me just see something. When you compare these two, so this is matrix, this is center weighted. You see, center weighted is putting on the field flash more importance on this than on the background. It's not, and it actually came out better. So what it said in the manual about using center weighted for portraits, it definitely is better when you use flash. Okay, so why is it better? Well, because I got better exposure for the background. But let's see if we got a good exposure of the subject, because I know that this is a good exposure. This one I'm not so sure. So let's see. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go to develop again, use this little tool here, check on my exposure. The exposure is perfect, it's fine. So both modes were able to do very well exposed for the, you know, for the subject with a field flash, but this one did a little better in terms of the background. I think what happens is with matrix is trying to do an average of everything, and you have here very white, and then here, so you have a lot of contrast between the highlights and the shadows. So you know, the parts that are white and the parts that are darker. Obviously the flash doesn't affect here, it only affects the front. So center weighted actually worked better. Now let's look at spot. Spot is going to take a really short time because you will notice immediately that you do not want to use spot. Okay, so here it didn't help my foreground, or my subject is trying to expose for the, no, it's not working. And then with flash, it overexposed the subject and completely blown out the background. The problem with that is that spot metering is very specific, okay? So if this picture, let's say I was taking a picture of this, right? And I wanted, and I spot meter for this because this is really what I care and I don't care about anything else, that may work. But you know what? If you're a beginner, I highly recommend that you don't use spot metering. I mean, that spot metering is really complicated and advanced, very advanced professionals like to use it. I don't use it, and I recommend that you don't use it. And here is the evidence. I mean, it's not because I know better than anybody else. I'm just showing you the evidence. Where did we get the best results? With field flash, using matrix, and use it center weighted. So I suggest that you keep your camera in matrix, and if you see that you have a situation like this, you may want to try between both and see which one does better, okay? Or do what I told you before. Remember when we talked about what to do when you have a picture like this, because you're going to see it in your viewfinder. By the way, when you're in your viewfinder, you're going to see this too. If you zoom to this, well, actually, no, if you zoom, you would have to take a picture of the target to get something like this. But the bottom line is, if you have a properly exposed subject, okay, and you notice that the background is too blown out, then what you do is you go on your exposure compensation, or if you're shooting manual, go one stop under, okay? So I'm going to put here -1. If that gives you, even 1 may not be enough. You may want to go even more. So let's say 1.5, okay? -1. And then on your flash, okay, increase 1.5. So what's going to happen is you're going to have this properly exposed and your background also what you want, okay? So I hope this was helpful. I know that it was a little longer than what I wanted to take. It's a complicated subject, and I hope after this you have a much better understanding of metering, and I didn't confuse you even more. I don't think I can be more confusing than the manual, that's for sure. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you subscribe to my channel. Thank you.